Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's edition of the Gamut Network. I have a really beautiful story to share today with a woman who's with us. Her name is Kathleen, and she really is going to share with us about what it was like growing up with cerebral palsy, as well as what it has served for others in her current job working with Dancing Dreams. So, Kathleen, it is so nice to have you on the show. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
I'm very good. I've been really looking forward to speaking with you so that you can share your story with our audience. Can we start with kind of the beginning of what life was like growing up with cerebral palsy?
Okay. So I mentioned before I was born with my disability. So cerebral palsy primarily affects the communication between the brain and the muscles and nerves. So it's a motor disorder, and it affects my movement and pretty much everything I do. I've always been a wheelchair user. When I was younger, I had a manual wheelchair, but starting when I was 10, I got a power chair, and I still use a power chair today. So growing up, I went to a mainstream school, so I was one of the only kids there with a visible disability. And at that time, that was still a fairly new idea. 90s, the concept of having kids with disabilities go to mainstream schools was just kind of taking off. So it was a new thing, new territory for everybody, and I'm certainly glad that I got the opportunity to go to a mainstream school, because that's something that people before me really fought for, and a privilege that the generations before me did not have. But it was very, very difficult being placed in a sort of pioneering position, because just when you're one of the first ones and the only ones, literally everything you do is. And I'll be honest, some people were accommodating, many were not. So,
And when you say not accommodating, in what way? Like from a physical perspective of maybe moving from one class to the other. How were they not accommodating?
Everything was a battle. Like, you'd have your plan for all your desks to be set up for the first day of school. You'd get there, none of them would be there. The lab tables were inaccessible. The field trip wasn't accessible. The bus didn't show up. It was just, everything was a bunch of moving parts that really didn't move together at all unless you pushed the envelope. So the gift in that is that I learned how to advocate for myself from a very early age. But at the same time, it's really kind of disturbing how much fighting is still involved in just existing in a mainstream school as a disabled person. So yeah, I learned a lot, but it's my hope that kids in the future will have an easier time. I am very lucky. I have a supportive family, and that also enabled me to push through. But it really requires a lot of emotional, mental, physical resources to just get through and remind people that you have a right to even be there.
And that you are a person. You are not defined by your disability. You are a young woman. You were a kid just trying to go to mainstream school like everybody else. And I'm just curious, how were you received by the kids, being that you were a pioneer, as you said, in being, you know, one of the first visibly disabled students?
Well, I actually don't like it so much when people say that my disability doesn't define me, because honestly, it does. It's not my entire definition, but it's part of my definition. So, you know, I'm very much at peace with saying that my disability does define me. You know, it's one layer of many, but it's there and it's a big part of me, and I wouldn't be the same person without it.
I
So,
love that perspective. Thank you for saying that and for bringing that up, because, you know, like many things in our world, you know, this is how you define yourself. And, you know, for example, the way that I maybe define my son is not the same as how you define yourself. And I love that this is without a doubt, you know, the example of how you have learned to advocate for yourself. I think it's beautiful the way that you just said that.
so you were asking me about people at school. People in the extreme school, they were generally nice to me. I was very lucky that I was not, you know, overtly bullied, but by the same token, I was very isolated, and people being nice to you or saying hello to you is not the same thing as people actually being a genuine friend to you. So,
Mhm.
especially as I got older, it was a lot of like, oh, hey, Kathleen, how are you? And then everybody would kind of go off and do their own thing. So, I got left out of a lot of things, and I don't necessarily think there was malice there. I think that a lot of people reach an age where they start to be able to do things that I can't do on my own. Like everybody was learning how to drive and they could go places without their parents and they didn't have to worry about things being physically accessible. So I think at a certain age, people just started to view me as, you know, inconvenient to take along, which was frustrating in its own right because, you know, like they're not low bar, you know, extreme isolation and kind of feeling like people don't even see you is not really a great alternative. So, yeah, it was hard, and it still is, even as an adult, because you're always going to encounter people that don't necessarily have interest in the necessary extra logistics in being a real friend to someone with a disability, but I have decided that it's better to have fewer friends and have them be genuine than to um, throw myself for are not seeing me in my entirety.
Mm.
Uh, I have always been very fortunate to have a strong group of friends, but many of them did not go to the same school as I did, and were from environments outside of school. So school itself was not exactly a great social scene for me, but I was fortunate to be able to go away to college.
Mm.
And I knew at that time that I didn't want to be in a situation where I was the only visibly disabled person again. So I purposely sought out a school that was friendly towards people with disabilities and was known for accessibility, and that's how I wound up at the University of Illinois. They're well known for their accessibility programs, and they have a nationally unique program for people with physical disabilities that allows people who need assistance with activities of daily living to live at school and have assistance from students who are working as personal care assistants and usually studying related fields. So that was a really nice feature of college for me. I got to be more social and to be in an environment where I wasn't the only wheelchair user that needed that kind of assistance. And I got to be independent in a bunch of new ways that I never really anticipated for myself in a college setting. So I feel very blessed that I was able to pull off my time at U of I for both undergrad and grad school.
Amazing. That is phenomenal. Kathleen, I want to ask go back to something that you talked about. If there was, a younger version of Kathleen out there, a young woman that is 8 years old and she's, about to embrace her school experience with cerebral palsy, what advice would you give her in terms of navigating mainstream environments in the education system, perhaps not having, being able to relate to other students in terms of others not having a disability? I think with your knowledge and your experience, I think that you could be a great resource for others out there that are about to embark upon that. What advice would you give to them, to that little girl?
I mean, that's a loaded question because there are so many pieces of advice, and I'm still learning myself as I go. I don't have everything figured out.
Oh, guess what? Neither do I, and
I don't think anybody does. But I'd say some of the advice I would give is to be patient and keep pushing through, and don't settle to be around people that don't appreciate you for everything that you are. It can be hard when making friends, meeting people is difficult, but a real friend is going to include you and embrace you with your disability in full view, not in spite of it, but with it as a part of you. And it's worth waiting to find those authentic people, even if that means you have 2 friends instead of 12.
Right.
I would
quality is there, the true friendship is there. They love you for every part of you.
Yeah. So definitely advice from a young age to start building a network of other people with disabilities who share similar experiences, because especially as you grow older, the person with a disability, you really need those peers in similar situations to share resources, to talk to vent with, to help you understand the services you're going to be using. And I think in doing that, in finding this community of people with disabilities, it's also an opportunity to see that disability doesn't have to be this big negative thing. There are things about it that are very difficult and sometimes heartbreaking, but there's also some things that are positive and uplifting and wonderful things that have only come into my life because of my disability, and that includes people I never would have met otherwise. So I think it's important to see that, just like so many other things in this life, disability is part of the human experience. It's a mixed blessing. It's not always easy, but that doesn't mean it has to be this big, awful thing either. And I think at the end of the day, the cool people I've met and the important things that I've learned have definitely outweighed all the struggles. That said, you should totally be allowed to voice the struggles too, because they're there.
And they're part of your life. And I love that, you know, that's authenticity, right? That's just being truthful to all the parts of you. But I would imagine one of the amazing things that came into your life was dancing dreams. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so that's a good example of a way that I was able to connect with other people with disabilities. I started dancing dreams when I was in 9th grade, so 2008. My best friend, Carol Leibowitz, had reached out to Joanne and suggested that she start another class for older dancers, because at the time she was only working with very little kids. So Joanne said yes, because she always says yes. And, you know, once she decides she's going to do something, she does it. So we started with a very small little class of older girls, and I have to be honest, I never really thought a dance class was going to be something that I was going to do, because I've always been kind of like a behind the scenes person, not really big on getting up on stage or anything like that. But when Kara asked me if I would do it with her, I was like, yeah, why not? It'll probably be fun, and we'll meet some new people. And we wound up having a great time. You know, when you have a disability of any kind, especially one that affects your ability to move and care for yourself, you know, your after school activities can be kind of limited. I couldn't play on any of the teams at school. So, you know, you look for things to do after school like everybody else. And the dance class was a good opportunity to socialize and have something recreational after school, basically like parallel to what other people my age were doing. Not exactly the same, of course, because
Yes.
I'm 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 always honest about the fact that, you know, in some ways people with disabilities are just like you, and in other ways we're just not. And I think it's a lie to just leave it at like, we're just like you, because that's not entirely true. We
Agreed. And it's also the challenge of it, right? Because you know, you want, you know, from our perspective, for what the world I want for my son is to have him in a mainstream world, to be included and a part and all of that. But as you said, there's just things he cannot participate in. He will never be able to. He can't do the same as you, like in terms of the after school programs and sports and all of that. So it's
right.
really catch 22 of the inclusion aspect of it, which is what we all want. You know, we want the world to feel inclusion, but there's parts of the world that are not going to work out.
I agree. You have to find that balance between, you know, the uh, big environment is the right one, because sometimes, inclusion sounds great in theory for a program, but then if you're the only person with a disability there and it's hard for you to keep up with everything and there's no one that has the same experience as you, you wind up feeling more isolated than you would feel in a disability specific program. So I'm very direct with people in saying that, like, yeah, mainstreaming, great, inclusion, great, so happy we have those options that didn't exist 30 years ago. But you also have to know when it's time to shift gears and maybe look for a disability specific, can have a space for when you just need to be with people who know what it's like. I think that everybody in certain groups feels that way sometimes, like whether it's a mom's club or a siblings of people with disabilities club, or a cultural club like an Irish club. Everybody sometimes just needs to be with their people.
Absolutely.
So that's
right. It's about feeling a part of something. And what I love so much about your story is that not only were you a student at Dancing Dreams, now at 27, you are working with Dancing Dreams. So tell me about how that happened.
Okay, so I was a dancer from 2008 to 2011 when I graduated, and I mentioned I went to college at the University of Illinois. I studied community health and disability studies there. Then I took a 1-year break and I went back there for grad school, and I got my master's in social work. So after I came back, Joanne had begun expanding the program beyond just the small dance class that we had. There's now 3 sites and also some programming for the parents and families. So she asked me if I'd be interested in putting together some speakers and presentations for the parents to go to while their kids are dancing. So I've been doing that for a couple of dance seasons now. It's a lot of remote work, scheduling speakers and things, but I enjoy it and I do my best to think about things that would have been useful to me when I was that age, and things that especially weren't offered to kids in schools that don't have a large disabled population. Because there's so many things, if you go to a quote regular school and you're an extreme minority, that you just don't hear about because there's nobody else that's in the same proverbial boat as you.
Right.
So I do my best to try to gather up the resources that I think would be most interesting and fun to these families, and especially the things that I enjoy doing and I feel really shaped my success.
I love that. And also what I love from the parent perspective is that now you are working from, with the parents and truly know from an authentic place what would benefit, from speakers or, other events that you're putting together. So bravo to Joanne for hiring you and keep thinking of you for this position, because it was really brilliant. And we have been fortunate enough to have had, or will have Joanne on the show she also shared the story about creating Dancing Dreams. So it's just wonderful to have both of you be a part of the show. But Kathleen, before we go, I like to ask all of my guests one final question.
Okay.
And that's the power of a vision board and the importance that it plays in really your hopes and dreams and wishes of what you want to accomplish in this lifetime. What or who would be on your vision board?
Wow, my vision board. Well, I think this is at the forefront of everyone's mind. I would love to see a healthy and safe resolution to this pandemic.
Yes, thank you. Me too.
And I'm looking forward to seeing all of this work out, and hopefully a vaccine real soon. I'm rooting for all the people that are working around the clock to come up with the answer to this, and I'm very excited about that. I feel like when we can all come out again, it's gonna be like one of those commercials with the coordinated group dance.
Yes, I think so. We're all gonna like dance out of our houses.
Yes. Also, I want to be able to someday live in my own apartment. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of long-term care drama that for people with disabilities either, but I'm still filing it away with my pile of dreams, something for the future. And of course, to be able to live there with my princess dog, who is right now the center of my universe because the dog is keeping us entertained during this quarantine. In the future, I would like to see some changes to the long-term care system that make it easier for people with disabilities to work and earn money without so much bureaucratic red tape and confusing policy and just round and round in circles. I have not been able to work for pay in the way that I want to yet because the long-term care system makes it very difficult to do so without losing all of your services. But I'm hoping
maybe you can make that change happen. Maybe you're the one who's going to make it happen.
I hope so. I'm going to work on it. It's certainly not something that one person can do alone, and there's existing programs that are a start, but I think we could do so much better than we're doing right now. And I'd love to see generally an expansion of supports for adults with disabilities, because I think, our culture is very wrapped up in like kids with disabilities, they're cute and they're fun. And then once you turn 18 or 21, it's like the societal support just kind of
shuts down,
ends. And we find ourselves being told two simultaneous contradictory messages. One is work, do this, do that, be a part of society, and then the other one is you can't work, you can't be a part of this society because our policies don't really allow it, and there's no housing for you, there's no jobs for you, there's no support for you. So it's like, how can you really get out there,
as you said? It's
how can you really get out there and do those things with no support? It's not as simple as just try as hard as you can and you'll get there, because there are a lot of institutional barriers. So that's another reason why I don't really subscribe to the idea of the oversimplified, you can do anything you put your mind to.
It's reality.
It's not just strength of character that gets things done. There's a lot of legal and policy and cultural and environmental attitudinal things that change the landscape for people with disabilities. So I'd really like to see, a better future for adults with disabilities, and one that's not just focused on taking care of us, but in actually asking us what we need and what we want, and not just shutting us away or listening to what our parents want for us, because our parents are, if we're lucky, a good support for us, but at the end of the day, it's our lives, not theirs.
I love it. What a perfect way to end the show. I love that. And if anybody out there who's listening to this and wants to kind of discuss this more with you, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you, Kathleen?
Well,
are you on Instagram?
Yeah. You can find me on Instagram. My handle is Squeaky Wheelchair.
Oh, I love that.
I also have a blog called The Squeaky Wheelchair, and you can find it at www.thesqueakywheelchairblog.com.
Perfect. I'm sure there'll be
just under my name, Kathleen Downes. So I'm fairly easy to find. And then, of course, anyone who is involved with Dancing Dreams, you can find me through Dancing Dreams as well. I'm Kathleen at dancingdreams.org.
Amazing. It was really quite fascinating, and I loved hearing your perspective on so many important points. Thank you so much for joining us today on the show. It was so wonderful to speak with you. If you would like to be on the Gamut Network, please email us at talent@gamutmanagement.com and tell us why you'd be a great guest. Please also don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel at the Gamut Network, and please like us on our social channels at Gamut Management. Kathleen, thank you again so much for joining us.
Thank you. Have a good day and stay safe.
You too.